All right, what's going on, y'all? Today I'm going to reveal my top 3 favorite steroids for putting on muscle mass. So when the goal is to bulk up, to be in off season, or put on actual true muscle tissue in the fastest, most efficient time possible, these are my top 3 favorite compounds for doing that. Now, before we get into it and I tell you what these 3 compounds are, I personally don't recommend that you run steroids, and if you are going to do so, make sure to do so under the care of a doctor. There's health risks that come along with this, and you should absolutely be making sure that you're keeping your health markers and your blood work at least somewhat in check if you are going to go this route. But like I said, I personally don't recommend anybody do this. It was my goal to become an IFBB pro bodybuilder, and so I essentially took this route to make that goal happen. With this, these also are my favorite compounds for putting on actual size. These are not going to be my favorite compounds if I was having the main goal of cutting down and trying to shred. These compounds are going to be perfect for really trying to put on muscle. And not only that, I've selected these as my top 3 favorite compounds also because they're a little bit safer than some of the other compounds out there. So some compounds can be very detrimental to your health markers. These are a little bit more mild in regards to negative side effects and negative outcomes with health markers and blood work. But these are my top 3 favorite compounds to use when in the off season or when the main goal is to bulk up. All right, so the first compound I've got for you, this is my all-time favorite one. This is what I said is the base of all my cycles. This is testosterone. So I personally prefer Test-E, testanethate. That's one of the longer esters. There's test-cypionate. There's also test-propionate, which is a shorter ester, but I like Test-E. Now, even with Test-E, most people out there will go ahead and inject that maybe twice a week. That's kind of the most common strategy out there when running a bulking cycle. I actually like to inject my testosterone no matter what the ester is every other day. I do this with pretty much every compound out there. I like to believe that you should try to get the most out of the least amount. So what this is going to do is, one, you're going to be able to run a lower dose, so it's going to be a little bit cheaper for you. But the main thing with this is if you're able to get more out of less, you're going to have less negative impact on your health markers and your blood work. And I've noticed that when you don't have these big peaks and troughs, when you go ahead and you inject, you've got this big peak, and then over the next few days it's coming down until you have another injection. If you're injecting every other day, you're not going to have these big peaks and troughs. You're going to have more stable levels, and because of that, you're going to be able to get more out of the least amount. So as far as doses go, a lot of people like to run testosterone on the lower end and keep other compounds on the higher end. A famous strategy with this is, you'll have a 2-to-1 ratio of trend to test. I personally really don't like that route. I actually like to keep test on the higher end compared to other compounds. I've had very little to no side effects when running testosterone. One, I think that's because I inject it more frequently, but then 2, I've been fortunate to not have many negative side effects. And most people I see out there, if you are running just testosterone or you're running testosterone with some of the other safer, more mild compounds, you shouldn't have too many, if any, negative side effects at all. Except, you do want to go ahead and keep a close eye on your blood work. So as far as dosing goes, this is anywhere from, say, 200 milligrams a week all the way up. You'll have some of the big open class pros that they're running over a gram a week of testosterone. Me personally, my sweet spot is 500 milligrams per week. The most I've ever run was 600 milligrams per week, and that just felt a bit much. I actually personally really like 500 milligrams per week, and I'll tell you my favorite cycle at the end of this video for putting on muscle mass. But as far as the base goes, testosterone, my personal pick is 500 milligrams per week. You're going to get a lot out of that for a long time. And unless you're really trying to push into, say, men's open, we're really trying to get 250 plus in the off season. You really frankly shouldn't need more than 500 milligrams per week unless you are just not responding to it. But me personally, like I said, I like to get the most out of the least amount. With testosterone, it can aromatize, so this is where, especially if you are running it in the amount of 500 milligrams per week, you're probably going to need an anti-estrogen. This could be Aromacin or Arimidex. I personally like Aromacin a little bit better, but you want to go ahead and find your sweet spot to where you get your estrogen in control. You don't want to bottom out your estrogen. That can have some, negative consequences, but also letting your estrogen run way too high can have negative consequences too, such as, a bunch of water gain, gynecomastia, and there's just some other, libido problems, all of that. So you want to go ahead and make sure you've got your estrogen in control. And so with that, I suggest having an AI like Aromasin or Arimidex on hand. All right, so the second compound I've got for you for running in the off season, this is a lot of people's favorite, is Primobolan. So Primo is one of the safer compounds out there. This is where you can actually run Primo at a little bit greater amounts than a lot of the other compounds, and it have a lot less negative outcomes on your blood work and health markers. Another great thing about Primo is that it's got really, really slow, clean gains. So you're going to keep these gains after your cycle, and you're going to notice good strength and size increases throughout the cycle. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger. He came out back in the day, and Primobolan was his favorite steroid back in the day. Most people have very little, if any, side effects with Primo. The downside to Primo, though, is real Primo usually is pretty expensive. It's one of the more expensive compounds out there, and it is highly faked. So if you don't, you're not getting this from a doctor and you don't have a good source, I would be very, very careful with using Primo because it is highly faked. But if you get real Primo on hand, you will see how great of a compound it is. It really, really does pair well with testosterone. And like I said, you can run a good bit of Primo before it having a lot of negative side effects. So me personally, the most I've ever run of Primo is 300 milligrams per week. I'm a men's physique guy. I'm about the size of men's physique or classic physique. I don't really have any plans to go much bigger than that. If you are going to want to essentially get freaking massive, like men's open size, massive from Primo, you are going to need to run quite a bit more. I've heard of many guys running 700 milligrams plus per week of Primo, and with that you are going to have some negative health marker outcomes with that, most likely. So that's where you've got to weigh out your pros and cons as far as risk, and that's going to get very, very, very expensive. But I noticed even with 300 milligrams per week, you will have very good, slow quality, clean gains, and it's just very, very mild. Not only that, I personally noticed even a more positive mood when taking Primo. It's just a very, very feel-good compound, and I absolutely love Primo. All right, so even more than Primo, and this is where some people are going to disagree with me, my favorite compound in the off season when actually trying to bulk up is NPP. So NPP is the short ester of Deca, and with that you're going to hold a lot less water. I personally don't like Deca just because of the crazy amount of water gain that you have. That's great for strength and all that, but it's not as great for health markers. And NPP, since it's a shorter ester, you're not going to hold near as much water. The great thing about NPP is the strength increases. If you guys have been following me, you know that my whole kind of theory behind bodybuilding is, really trying to go in with high intensity bodybuilding and really progress week after week. With that, you're trying to really, really have strength. So my favorite cycle is test with a little bit of NPP. You do that, you're going to have crazy strength increases. And with that, as long as you're eating for it, you're going to have very, very, very good gains. Now, this goes back to the whole point of you've got to go ahead and have the diet set up. You've got to have the training set up, because without it, these compounds, yes, you're going to get a little bit out of them just taking them, but you need to have the diet and the training in place, because what you're doing is you're going ahead, giving it the stimulus to actually grow by progressing week after week in the gym, and then the food itself is the building blocks. These compounds are going to give you the strength and then also give you more anabolism to grow even more. But you need to go ahead and have your diet and training set in place. Another great thing though with NPP is, since it is the same thing as Deca, just short ester, it will help with joint pain. So as you are progressing in your lifts, and if you are doing high intensity bodybuilding like what I suggest, and you're really, really, really pushing some heavy weight, this will protect your joints a little bit and relieve you from pretty much any joint pain. So if you're starting to get elbow pain, knee pain, all of that, taking a little bit of NPP can help. So with NPP, I personally like 150 milligrams to 200 milligrams per week. 200 is usually where I set it. Some people go quite a bit higher with this. I don't like going much higher than 200 milligrams per week. That's where I personally start seeing sides that I don't really like. But 200 milligrams per week, you're going to get quite a bit out of that. especially if your main goal is strength, and with the strength comes muscle mass. So my favorite off-season cycle, I've done tests with Primo, I've done tests with MPP, tests with a little bit of MPP, so 500 milligrams per week of Testy with 200 milligrams a week of MPP. That's my sweet spot. That's my absolute favorite off-season bulking cycle that I've run to date, and that's kind of the one I would pick if you had to give me one cycle to run essentially for bulking for the rest of my life. It'd be test with a little bit of MPP. The strength increases I get from that, the muscle mass I get from that, and then 3, I've not had huge negative impacts on my blood work when running that. But these are my favorite 3 compounds for putting on size. First off, testosterone, that's definitely the base. And then with that, I'd go ahead and select either Primo or MPP. Some people like to go ahead and do both. I personally like just testosterone with a little bit of MPP. I get a ton out of that. And if you guys are having your training set up on point and your diet set up on point, you're going to get really, really big with that cycle. But like I said before, don't just take my word for it. Do your own research. Make sure you talk to a doctor. Keep your health markers in check. Keep your blood work in check. And you guys should be good to go. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Leave any comments or questions down below. Be happy, be positive, be powerful, and have a great rest of your day.